Okay, good morning to everybody. It's such a privilege to be here and to learn with you this morning. Be'ezras Hashem, this is going to be the first in a three-part series over the next couple of weeks, each Wednesday, for the next 3 weeks, preparing ourselves for Purim, Abalinu L'Taiva, as we enter Chodesh Adar. I saw from one of the tzaddikim who says that not just Mishenichnas Adar, Marbe Mesimcha, they said Mishenichnas Shabbos Mevarchim Adar, already Marbe Mesimcha, so even though it's before Chodesh Adar itself, but Adar is already very much in the air. And with Hashem's help, really everything that I try to teach, there are so many wonderful teachers of halacha, and I feel that my personal tchum is to try to help Jews and Yidden, men, women, boys and girls, all of us, and hopefully also myself, to be able to approach halacha with a little bit of a deeper perspective, to understand that halachas are the vessels, hein gufe halachas, it's like the body, there has to be a neshama in the halacha, that's the point. Right? That point isn't simply just to know what the rules are and the parameters and to make sure that we're ticking the boxes, we'll get Olam Haba one day. Right? The point is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu intended for halacha to be really an immersive experience of consciousness expansion, right? That everything that we engage in is supposed to help to bring us to a deeper level of emunah, like the pasuk in Tehillim says, "V'chol mitzvaysecha emunah." Right? The whole point of all the mitzvahs is just emunah, it's just Eibishter, it's just to bring HaKadosh Baruch Hu more and more deeply into our lives. This is what the Gemara Makkas tells us, Bach Habakuk, of course, v'hamidan al achas. He said, if you have to sum up the whole Yiddishkeit with all the different mitzvahs, with all of their parameters and the dikduke halachas, tzadik ve'emunasa yichya. At the end of the day, it's about living with emunah, and that's what halacha is. Halacha means to walk, right? Who are we walking with? To walk with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, l'tayil with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, b'gan Eden. Forget about the next world, what this world could be if a person's living life plugged in to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So in that vein, what we're going to attempt to do in the next 3 weeks is to take different sugyas of Hilchos Purim and to try our best using the Sfarim HaKadoshim from the tzaddikim, from the VaShemesh largely, or the VaShemesh HaKadosh, to be able to give ourselves a deeper perspective and to explore the inner dimension of some of these mitzvahs. And so the first shir, which is today, we're going to be taking a look at some of the halachas with regard to the reading of the Megillah. These halachas really come from the first two Mishnayos in Perek Beis in Megillah, and the Gemara fleshes all of these things out, but right now we're just going to learn them on a very, very simple, basic level, and mamash just read these two Mishnayos together. It's all of the first Mishnah and part of the second Mishnah, and this particular teaching comes from the Ma'ar VaShemesh, who is third generation, really fourth generation of Chasidus. Rav Klonimus Kalman Epstein was a tremendous going, and we have his writings in Nigla and in Nister, and he was a Talmud of both the Berditchev Rav of Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, as well as the Noam Elimelech. So he came from that realm, or both, of course, Talmidim of the Maggid of Mezrich, who himself was the primary disciple of the Baal Shem Tov, and so this comes from that Beis Medrash, and he begins. The Gemara, originally from the Mishnah, HaKoireh es HaMegillah l'mafreya lo yatsa. If a person reads the Megillah out of order, backwards, he starts in one place and then he reads backwards, lo yatsa, it needs to be read in order. Kara al peh, if a person reads it without a text, lo yatsa. Also, a person just knows the Megillah by heart and he reads it, also lo yatsa. Kara targum mechol lashon lo yatsa, it says if you read the Megillah in targum and any lashon, it is the person's not yotze, right? And specifically, if you look at the Mishnah over there, it's speaking about a person who only knows Lashon HaKodesh. You speak it in a different language, that's not going to help that person. However, v'haloyes, but a person who does speak another language, sheshama ashuris, even if he doesn't understand Lashon HaKodesh, right? Meaning the reverse, if a person doesn't understand Lashon HaKodesh, but you read the Megillah, which is a fascinating thing, because it's not about the Shmiya Shabbat. He doesn't understand the Megillah, but still just hearing the Lashon that's being read out of Ksav Ashuris, Yatza, that person is Yatza. What he skipped out over there, which is the Vechulu, which is slightly interesting because it doesn't really tie in, as you'll see, to the way that he learns this Bepnimius, but it's maybe there's a way that you can tie it in, but it's not going to be part of his elucidation, is that if you have a person who is a loyes, right, who does speak English, a person who speaks any language other than Hebrew, right, like Laz, right, the Lashon Laz, right, a loyes, a person who speaks the translation. If that person hears the Megillah read in French, let's say, which is classic Laz, right, in Rashi, but if a person hears it in Yiddish or something like that, that person will be Yotze. But he's not gonna be addressing that. So he sort of leaves that part out. But Va'aloye Sheshama Ashuris, again, if a person does not understand Lashon HaKodesh, but he comes to Shul and he hears the Megillah read in Lashon HaKodesh, even though he doesn't understand it, a person is Yotze. And then, this is the second Mishnah, Kar Sirugin, if a person reads the Megillah, and this is what it means on a literal level, where he reads it and then stops. And then he picks up again. He reads it and stops, even if he paused as much as it would take, like let's say a half hour, usually 35 minutes or so, to read the whole Megillah, and then he picks up again, that's fine. He was Yotze with big breaks. That's not called hefsik for the standpoint of reading the Megillah. That's okay. And the same is true for nisnamnim. If a person is dozing off and then he wakes up a little bit and he keeps on reading, he dozes off, which is a similar thing to sirugim. But over here, there's the bigger chiddush is that he slipped out of the regular waking consciousness and then he wakes up and he carries on. That's also yatsa. And the Gemara in Tainis tells us what's the definition of nisnamnim. The Gemara in Tainis tells us nim v'lay nim. Tir v'lay tir. He's not really sleeping, but he's not really awake. And if you ask him a question, he can answer you, but he's not speaking with total clarity, right? And so I know what that means because I see people all the time in my shiur who are nim v'lay nim, tir v'lay tir. So any Dirish knows what that is, that gather. But al kapanim, that's what it means. A person who's sort of nisnamnein. Okay. Who is reading? Who's reading? Right? No, not listening, because I believe that you would miss out large parts. But I don't want to say for sure. But the Mishnah is speaking about people who are reading the Megillah, and that's what you see. Okay, so these are the halachas, some of the parameters that are brought to enable us to understand what this inyan of Mikra Megillah is. But again, the Torah is not just telling us sort of arbitrary dinim, right? Meaning each of these laws is a vessel for spiritual insight that is supposed to enable us to understand. What's the inyan of Mikra Megillah? What's that supposed to mean for my neshama, for my Yiddishkeit? And so here the Ma'ar VaShemesh pulls back the curtain on these halachas and he explains. He says we can read these mishnayos al derech remez, al pi maimer Chazal. The Chazal say in the Gemara in Megillah, the Sholcha Esther l'Chachamim. Esther sent a message to the Chachmei Adar and she said, Kasvuni l'daires, allow this story of the Megillah to be recorded for all of history. And they go back and forth, and they say it's going to cause issues with the Umas HaOlam, and she needs a pasuk, and finally they find a pasuk, Soiv Zois Zikar and Basefer, right? And they darshan all these different things, and Basefer they say, we found a pasuk where we can include the story that happened with Achashverosh and Haman and Vashti and Esther and the whole story of the Megillah into the canon, into the books of Tanakh. Says the Ma'ar VaShemesh, I don't understand. V'roi lahavin, ma haya kavanasam bazeh. What's the whole kavana there? Like what's the back and forth? Why did they need to find a pasuk to enable them to include Esther in the 24 books of Tanakh? There are many other Nevi'im of that time. Kosus, Ephraim, Daniel, Azariah, Nehemiah, Nehemiah, Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi. Right? All of those Nevi'im of Trei Asar were included in Tanakh. We don't find in the Gemara that we needed to find a pasuk that will enable us to include Ezra in Tanakh. Like they were Nevi'im and they were included. Especially Ubafrati says, right? Meaning we know that there were 3 million, the Gemara tells us, 3 million prophets at the time where there was prophecy for Klal Yisrael, but we only included in Tanakh those nevuas that were necessary l'dairos. He says, what do you don't think the Megillah is necessary l'dairos? That's a story. I mean, the Pesukim say, Chu'asa Mayisa, Lav Netzach, V'Sekvasa B'chol Dar V'Dar. Not only that, but the Tzadikim say based on that Pasuk, right? Also, V'Layavar Ksiv. Based on that, also, there are 2 sources that ultimately all of the other Yom Tovim will fade away after Mashiach comes, and there's a time of the Yom Shekula Shabbos, and then the Ariya Kadosh says, and I think I mentioned this in this context before, there will be a Yom Shekula Yom Tiv, and then after that is a Yom Shekula Purim, and that's forever and ever and ever. There's no greater nevuah that's l'dairos than the nevuah of Esther Baruch HaKodesh Nemra, and all of that. So what do they need a pasuk for? So he says a very deep thing. We've explained in other places Purim, what was happening in the time of Purim, and then B'mei HaPurim means not just those days that the Megillah could be read, Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, and so on, but even in our time of Purim. Like the B'ditchever, who is the Rebbe of this tzaddik, said by Yamim HaHaim that these miracles were not just commemorating something that happened by Yamim HaHaim, but we're re-experiencing those spiritual energies that are revealed anew each year, Bazman Hazeh. So what's happening? Not what happened. What is happening? Memashmesh v'lavai. Like we're coming into this energy. What is that energy that is shining b'mei Purim? Misnoitzetz moyach hachachma derech hamalchus shamayim. What's happening is that in Malchus, which is our realm, right, of current events and the way that things unfold, and the realm of the physical, and the realm of the vessels, and the realm of matter, and physicality, and individuality, and our experience of life in this realm is revealed how mamish the moyach hachachma, which is Hashem's master plan, is being revealed through current events. And that's really what the Megillah is. We know that Hashem's name is not mentioned in the Megillah. The whole thing is Megillah Esther, right? Esther is hidden. The whole thing is that the whole story was concealed in such a way. We're learning with our Chabura, some of us have already learned together this morning. We're learning that there are people who, they'll see the biggest nace in the world and they'll be master. They'll say it was just Heva, right? And interestingly enough, Josephus brings the story of Purim, and he writes over there explicitly in his works, Antiquities of the Jews, he says in there that there were many people who lived at the time of Purim who didn't see what the whole miracle was, and they didn't understand what the Jews were so excited about. Just a very basic thing. It was coincidence after coincidence that it just so happened to be that Vashti made a mistake, threw her out, Esther got in, Bigsan and Seresh, Mordechai, Haman, the whole thing just happened the way that it happened. But ultimately, you and I know from the standpoint of Emunah, this was a gilui, this was a revelation of the Moyach HaChachma of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's big picture master plan, which is always Chachma, that's associated with vision, seeing, taking a step back, seeing a big picture that reveals itself derech HaMalchus Shamayim, that reveals itself in the Malchus, that enables us to understand that every single piece of news that we read, and that's true on a collective level, but every single experience that we have, it might look like it's the most just arbitrary thing that you experience. You bump into somebody in the store, this one says this thing to you, you happen to see a bit of information here or there, you see a post somewhere on social media, and you think like, stam, there's no stam. Every single bit of input that we take into our senses is a direct message, min hashamayim, every second of life, and one day we're going to see that. When we get to catch a glimpse of that in Olam Hazeh, that's called the Moyach HaChachma, that's revealing itself, and of course that's what happened in the miracle of Purim. As is known in the Kisvei Ari, Asher Mordechai Meramiz l'Chachma Ilah. Mordechai is the aspect of this incredible Chachma Ilah. Mordechai is the aspect of the revealed realm. Mordechai is Gematria Rab Chesed. Mordechai is just the Gilui, is the revelation, the masculine aspect of revealed energy. That's Mordechai. Moradachi. That's the aspect of Chachma Ilah. And the Esther is Meramezes L'Malchus Shamayim. Esther is the feminine aspect, the Kli, Olam Hazeh. And together, Mordechai and Esther are the vessels through which this energy of Purim unfolds, and the whole story happens through them. Mordechai and Esther. Mordechai is Chachma, Esther is Malchus. Kemaimra Kasav Tilbash Esther, Malchus. Right? The pasuk tells us that she enclothed herself in royal garments, but we see that Esther has a connection to Malchus, both through this pasuk, also because Esther is feminine, and that's always the feminine energy, and also Esther in and of herself means the realm that's hidden. That from there, Esther was able to bring the energy of Mordechai down into this realm and revealed Ruach HaKodesh, the way that the whole world is mamish. There's nothing that's happening by itself. There's no Mikra. Of course, Amalek, we were speaking about Amalek before. Amalek's whole thing is Mikra. How did they attack us? With this consciousness of happenstance, the opposite of Emunah, right? That leads to Kriros, that leads to a cold world, that leads to a world that's blocked up, right? And not a world that's open, and not a world that's full of hope and purpose. Okay. The Gam is of Kisvei Ari, and it's also brought in the writings of the Arizal. Ketevas Megillah below Yud, that if you have the word Megillah and leave the Yud out, Oila b'gematria Ayin Ches, it equals Ayin Ches, Mispar Gimel Havayas, which is itself the gematria of 3 times Yud Ke Vav Ke, which is 26. Sheyesh Bahem, that if you take 3 times these 4 letters of Yud Ke Vav Ke, there are 12 letters in all. V'makoilo, again, this is just Kisvei Ari, Oilim Yud Gimel. So if you add 1, because you always add 1 for gematria, that aspect is the 13. Shem Shorish Hayud Gimel Mechilin Derachme. These are the 13 midas of Rachamim Shenem Shachim Al Yidei Megillah that we are drawing down when we read the Megillah. You read the Megillah 3 times Yud Ke Vav Ke, 12 letters, Yud Gimel, 13 midas of Rachamim. And the Berditchever goes into this very deeply in the Kedushas L'Purim, and he describes at length, great length, what's happening in Shemayim when we read the Megillah. It's not stam. And you have 2 kinds of people. One person is coming to shul because it's Purim, and it says in my Rambam, that you have to read Megillah, and I go in, I heard the Megillah, and I walk out and I tick it off, which is beautiful, and you get Olam Haba. But the Berditchever and all the tzaddikim wanted that we should have paradise, not just in the next world, but paradise in this world. That mitzvah is not just a commandment, but it's tzavsa, it's a relationship. I need to know what's taking place on a metaphysical level, what's happening in my neshama, the opportunities that are open to us on the Yamim Tov and Bayamim Mahim, that we can re-experience Bazman Hazeh. What's happening is that the 13 midas of Rachamim are shining. Shenimshachim al yidei Megillah, that we draw down through the reading of the Megillah, ubechol shana v'shana, and each and every year, b'mei Purim, each and every year again anew. Misnoitzi tamoichin ilayin. These elevated revelations of the master plan of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashkacha, are shining and revealed derech HaMalchus through our experience of reality. And a person drinks a little bit on Purim, and you can get to that place, even if a person doesn't drink, but a person can get to a place of emunah to be able to really feel and remember and understand that every single thing that's happening with Am Yisrael, befrat now over the last year and a half, Purim is just a time where you can sort of peek behind the curtain and really lean into the emunah, that kol mada avid rachamana, even the most incredibly tragic, horrible things. We have the levaya today, right, of the Bibas family. A person can lean into that emunah, and it's just something that you just ayidam aron shtoik kach ala b'machshav. You can't even say it with your mouth, but a Jew knows inside HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running the show, and we don't understand how, but one day we will, right? And that's the energy of Purim. That's the opposite of Amalek that comes with all of his sophistication to cool us off, to cause us to become frozen in our path. Asher karcha baderech, that you think that you're on the way to Geula, forget about it. God has forsaken you. There's no hope, and that's Amalek. And this is what Purim is coming to battle with, to give us an infusion of Emunah. And all the judgments are sweetened through the reading of the Megillah, which is an incredible thing. Like, this is what's going to happen in a couple of weeks, and we have this incredible privilege to know that we're mamish going to be part of allowing to flow down into our world a tremendous infusion of Hashkacha. And through this, in Adar, we know that the halacha is about this. A person should try to have a court case in Adar, right? There's an energy of a special boost of sweetening Gzeiras Rais. If there's a terrible, dangerous, bad decree, because heavenly lights are open. And the drawing down of the Yud Gimel Lidos of Rachamim of Chesed, Mordechai Esther, in the same way that we had in the time of Mordechai Esther, Nisim, when there were incredible miracles that took place, and we should be zeicha to that now. And this is what Esther wanted to tell the Chachamim. Kisvuni l'dairos. Write me for generations. Institute this in such a way, or recognize that the story of Purim was not isolated, but that it is a revelation of that which is going to recur each and every year of Jewish history, where every single year on the Yemei Purim, the same energy is being revealed. Kisvuni l'dairos. Ulaham shechasadim, to sweeten the gevuras, to sweeten those harsh decrees. Ulaham shechasadim, and to draw down heavenly mercy v'oros hakadoshim and holy lights. Ala Knesset Yisrael, onto the collective soul of Am Yisrael, al yidei kriyas ha-Megillah b'mei Purim, through the reading of the Megillah on Purim. V'unasen nisim and flies b'chol dar v'dar al yidei zeh, and that miracles should take place each and every year. Miracles should take place. An infusion of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love and chesed and guidance should be brought down into the world through the reading of the Megillah. So now he begins. V'zeh ramzu, and this is the remes. Hakoreh es ha-Megillah l'mafreya lo yatsa. A person who reads the Megillah, it means literally backwards, is not yotze. What does that mean, Pirish? By Ara Meir, one of the earlier tzaddikim, the Ara Meir already explained. She'em koreh es ha-Megillah kis derech sipuri maisiyas. She'az l'mafreya. If a person only reads the Megillah as if it's some story that happened limafreya, right, which means a long time ago in this context, like you read a ki'ilu, oh, it's a nice story, it's something that happened then, and maybe we're getting together to commemorate it. So he says, ve'ena mala alibai, and a person doesn't realize in the moment of reading the Megillah, this is not a commemoration, the gates are opening, this is channeling down Yud Gimel Midas of Rachamim. Asher Hashem Yisbarach oisel anu nisim and applies b'chol dar v'dar b'schus hakriya, that in the schus of the Kriya of the Megillah, we're re-triggering, and that serves as a catalyst to bring down those very oiris that existed in the time of the Megillah, that they should flow down into our reality. Lo yatsa. Now again, does he mean lo yatsa halachically? The whole thing is not halachic, you understand? It means lo yatsa, meaning you missed the point, right? You're yatzet, but that's not the inyan of Megillah. That's not what Megillah is supposed to be. So lo yatsa. Right, because what's the whole point of halacha? Like we said, is that it should enable a person to deepen their experience of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Otherwise, what is it? It's hein guf. So you have the whole body, but kaguf b'lei neshama, right? Like the Shlach Kadosh says, a mitzvah without kavana is the body, but without the soul. Or what's the soul? The soul is to walk into shul with the joy of knowing that right now in these moments, gates are opening in Shamayim, gates are opening in your own life. that you could be Zaycha to Nisim v'Neflois, Befrat u'Bechlal. And that's a person who's not reading the Megillah Lemafreya. That person realizes the Megillah is happening right now. It's not something that happened by Yom Haim. It's something that's also taking place Bazman Hazeh. Okay, that's the first remez. Then he goes, Kara al-Piv or Balpeh lo yatsa. If a person just reads it by heart, lo yatsa. What does that mean? So he says an incredible thing. Yesh lirmois. Again, al derech remez. Ki ni achilik asher bein Torah shebiksav leTorah shebalpeh. There's a fundamental distinction between Torah shebiksav and Torah shebalpeh. Who? Ki b'Torah shebiksav nirmas kol ma shetalmid vasik asel lechadesh. Torah shebalpeh was already included within Torah shebiksav because the Medrash and the Gemara tells us that all that which any Talmud Vasik, that any wise student throughout history is going to be mechadish, come up with a novel idea, was already Ne'emar l'Moshe b'Sinai. It was already told to Moshe Rabbeinu. It's included within Torah shebiksav. Asher ein kates v'soif l'ma sheneschadish, right? There's no end, because we'd call that, like, that is Torah shebalpeh. But it's all included in Torah shebiksav. The asel is chadesh. V'leka midid l'remiza baraisa. There's nothing that happens in the world that isn't hinted to in some way already in the Torah shebiksav. Ubechal sha'adam moitze basichli is chadashim. And the more, maybe I should say kichal, ubechal sha'a rather. Ubechal sha'a, each and every moment of a person's life, you can find sichli is chadashim. There's brand new chidushim, which is such a pella, like a person comes up with a chiddush, and you think this is the same Torah that for thousands of years the biggest tzaddikim and ga'onim have been, but you can come up with your own chiddush, and it's endless and endless and endless. It's an incredible thing. That's our Torah shebiksav. You can find sichlius chadashim, v'yuchalinsa soides gedolim. You can find very deep mysteries and secrets. V'chidushay Torah chadashim and brand new chidushim. But masha'in came Torah shebalpeh ein nirmazba. Torah shebalpeh doesn't necessarily have that same skula. Right? If you learn a Gemara, you learn the Rishonim, that's what it is. You know the Gemara, and then you paskin la'alach, and that's what it is. Now, of course, there's always a derech remez, and a derech drush, and a derech soid, even in Torah shebalpeh, but you have to understand that all of that is still included in Torah shebiksav, right? Meaning that is still under the gather of the Torah shebalpeh, that was all already included in Torah shebiksav. And so there's a fundamental distinction between the capacity to discover endless allusions and remazim and applications between Torah shebiksav and the Torah shebalpeh. See, he says, there's a huge chiddush, which is a shocking thing. Esther, this is what Esther wanted to say. Not only is my name spiritually relevant because metaphysically every year again and anew, the lights of the Megillah, the lights of the Purim story are coming down into our reality. But more than that, kisvuni l'dairis. This should be considered mamish, which it is, of course, Torah shebiksav. Asher b'chol eis yimatzu ba sichlius chadashim v'razin da'iraisa. That the Megillah has a special inyan that you can find endless secrets of the Megillah. Every year, that brand new Sfarim coming out with new secrets, new levels of understanding. The Megillah is mamish, endless. Some of the deepest Sodei Torah are in the Megillah. Kiyadua. That the Megillah has this special inyan. Asher b'chol eis yimatzaba sichlius chadashim v'razin da'iraisa kamar b'shar Torah shebiksav. That it shouldn't just be included as, again, part of our tradition, but kisvuni l'dairis. V'zeh yesh lirmez kan. And that's what it means over here. You can come to shul and listen to the Megillah and recognize, okay, Chazal instituted, we should read the Megillah each year anew. But a person can still come in and consider it to be a closed book. You heard the Megillah, you heard the Megillah. That's what it is. That's the translation. You read it with Rashi and a Mefarish, and that's what it is. A person has to realize, no, it has to become your Megillah. Meaning you have to become the Torah shebalpeh of the Megillah. You have to apply it to your own life, in your own personal circumstances. It's not a general story about the nation. It's a story about each and every one of us. See, he says, V'zeh yesh lirmez kan hakoira al peh la yatsa. Meaning if you read the Megillah like Torah shebalpeh, right, meaning something that doesn't contain endless allusion, also la yatsa. Because you have to be able to find your own story in the Megillah. Meaning if you read the Megillah, and a person doesn't realize just what you sit in front of when you sit in front of a Megillah, it's mamish. This Soif Kal Anisim, it's the book for Gullus. It's mamish, a book for our time. It's teaching us about what we need to do in our generation to battle against the last vestiges of Amalek within us and in the world at large. Amalek is a consciousness, right? Amalek means karcha. Amalek means krirus. Amalek means hopelessness. Amalek means means despair. Amalek means, very sophisticated and academic intellectualism. And Amalek destroys the spirit. Amalek doesn't realize that people are more than brains with a body to transport the brain from one place to the next. A person is a heart, a person is emotion, a person is feeling, a person is faith. And Amalek disregards all of this. So to battle that, we absolutely must be reading the Megillah as the most relevant, in a certain sense, of all the 24 books of Tanakh, because it's a story for now. And a person shouldn't just read it as Torah Sheba'al Peh, but it has to be something chidushe chidushim, right? Verimze Torah adin shir v'kates so lo yatsa. That's also an aspect of really missing out on what Purim has to offer us. We carry on. Last few minutes. Yes, sure.
Wasn't the question Manishtamah from Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, and all these four?
Yeah.
They're all Torah itself.
Nachon.
They are Torah itself.
Nachon. That's not the question. No, his original question was, why do you need a pasuk? Yeah, why do you need a special pasuk? That's right. That's right. L'chayra, this is also a nevuah. Esther was a nevuah.
That was the question.
Yes, and the answer is that it is. But the point is that there's an additional element where a person, even though it was included in Chavdal Sifrei Tanakh, because there was a Maso-Matan about it, you might consider it, okay, they included it, but it is part of Torah Shebiksav, but because the way that it's told is a story without clear nevuahs that make it clear that it's L'Dairos, a person can still read it as a story that's somehow relevant, we commemorate it, and it's part of our Tanakh. He's making it clear that no, the Megillah is not just a story, even though it unfolds like a story. And even though it doesn't seem to include any clear prophecies for the future, it was written in there, it was Kasvuni L'Dairos, and we shouldn't read it al peh simply as a story, but a person should endeavor to find their own journey within it. Okay, and that's the additional element. But in Echanami, Mamash is Torah Shebiksav. But a person still could approach it like just Sipurei Maisius, because that's the form that it took. We carry on the last few minutes. Kara Targum Mechalashon Lo Yatsa. If you read it, translate it into some other language, a person was not yotze roimes. What this means is, because the specific words that are being read in the Megillah with Ksav Ashuris are drawing down very specific spiritual energies, and nothing's arbitrary. And drawing down great kindnesses. And if you read it in a foreign language, then it could be that we're going to draw down that chesed to the nation, the language which we're speaking. Which again, he's basing this off his Rebbe, the Berditcher. If you want to know the whole thing, you have to look in Kedushas L'Purim. That's printed at the end of Sefer Kedushas Liba, where he goes into this ba'arichos ad l'ma'od in an absolutely fascinating way. I put out a kuntris on that a few years ago, summarizing it. Maybe we can get a few copies for the shul, but take a look over there because that's what he's basing this off. But you can actually draw it onto that lashon, onto that nation. Therefore, the other way around, if you have a person who speaks another language, it doesn't matter if he actually understands it, but all the while that he's hearing the Megillah be read in Ksav Ashuris, it's having the proper impact and it's coming down into Knesset Yisrael, of which his or her particular soul is a part, and therefore the Ashpais are coming down from them as well. We don't have time now to read the rest of it inside. I'm just going to say it outside because next week will be a different Inyan, where he says, Kara Sirugin, if a person skips. See, he brings from the Gemara Megillah where there's a concept and a conversation about, based on the words in the Megillah, as Kol HaToikef, right, all the strength and the power of this miracle. And the Gemara has a discussion of where a person needs to read from in order to be Yotze in the Megillah. And there are a couple of different options. Number one is Takvish al Achashverosh, right? Either you read it from the strength of Achashverosh, which is what we paskin like, which is the whole Megillah, right, from beginning to the end, or the strength of Mordechai, which is from the pasuk Mi'ish Yehudi, or from the strength of Haman, which is Acher Advar Me'ela, or from the takvay of the Nes, where the Nes began, which is of course Balaylahu Nadada Shnas HaMelech. And the question of the Gemara is, where do you read it? See, he says Kara Surugin. He says what Kara Surugin means, which a person is Yotze, is that even though, again, la halacha, we don't pass in this way, but conceptually, there are many different experiences in Am Yisrael's journey where we need to draw on different aspects of the Purim story. Sometimes our issue comes mamish from the king. That's Takvish Achashverosh. Sometimes our issue comes from the people around the king who are advising him. It's not mamish the king, and that's Takvish Haman. Sometimes, the Indian is, we need, forget about Sur Meirah, but to draw down from Asay Toiv and to connect to the Tzaddikim, that's Takvish al Mordechai, and then Takvish, I'm already in Adalayada, and then Takvish al Nes. Right, so he says, Karis Surugin is a reference to this, that we have to know because the Megillah is relevant in each and every generation, and because it's not mamish, it's not Torah Sheba'al Peh, it's mamish Torah Shebiksav, and it contains relevance to our time. So a person needs to know, that tzaddikim need to know, which part of the Megillah are we trying to tap, which energy, takvashal Achashverosh, takvashal Haman, takvashal Nes, takvashal. This is called sirugin, right? Meaning the skipping throughout the Megillah to sort of find the particular parts of the Megillah that are relevant and reference our experience. And then finally we finish off umisnamnem, that a person is dozing is Yoitze, because he says the whole inyan of the Nes was that Haman thought, right, where he says, Yeshnoi am echad, Chazal darshan, Yeshnoi, like a Lashon sleep, not just there is one nation, Mefuzar Mefar ben Amim, but Aleheim Yashenhu, right? He says their God is sleeping, right? And of course we know that even though it says Nada Dashnas HaMelech, right, and it's a reference to the Melech, but of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Hine Lo Yanav Lo Yishan Shaymi Yisrael. And a person needs to know that misnamnem, if a person is hovering in between wakefulness and sleep, they're yotzeh, because in a certain sense, that was the state that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was in Kiviyachol, where on the surface it looked like he was sleeping, but of course HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Veloinim and Veloitir. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not sleeping, and if you call out to that person who's in a state of misnamnem, you call to him, he will answer you. And that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu was in that state where Vayitzak, right, Mordechai grabbed all the Jews and he gathered them, Vayizaku Za'aka Mara Gedola, and he called out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu was in a state of Nim Veloinim, Tir Veloitir, that if you kara, so Anale, he's able to answer, and that's the aspect of Nisnamnem that's very relevant to the Megillah. So over here are just a few deeper insights on Mishnayos in Megillah, but we read it like this, it brings it to life, and it's with Neshama, and it's with Dveikus, and it's with Kutshabrichu, and with Eibishter, and that's what Allah is really supposed to be. Kadosh Baruch Hu should bless us with an amazing week, thinking about these ideas, getting our Neshamas ready for Chodesh Adar Ba'aleinu L'Taiva, and we'll carry on next week with the second episode in the series. Yashar Koach, thank you so much. Thank you for joining.